When I present at an Indigenous-centred conference, like the Indigenous Researchers Forum, I always think I'm going to get a much more sympathetic audience. An audience that understands where I'm coming from, that understands some of who I am and where the work that I'm discussing has originated and some of my thought processes. And overwhelmingly, I've been thinking that this is what Indigenous knowledge is. Of course, it's all of those other things that I'm reading too, and I'm not just trying to read my own experience into it. But I've started to wonder if that imagining that this is a safer place is just that. That it's actually about feeling a sense of privilege within that space, and that that's what I need to start to challenge within the academy, and I think other Indigenous academics and students need to challenge as well. So part of what I'm doing here, as you probably read if you've started to read the essay, is to set up a kind of preamble that then will then be challenged, because this is a linear form video. I'm not showing you anything that's magical, it's just me talking. It's confabulation. There's something about it that's slightly different to reading it on the page because, of course, it's conversational. Can I test even the veracity of the material that I'm presenting? No, because it's how I feel, which also makes it authentic, but also makes it kind of problematic if I'm speaking from the Indigenous experience. That was my concern with the case study, and it continues to be my concern as I develop that case study up into a larger special study, which is what I chose to do because I felt as though I'd explored a very small element of what we'd been discussing throughout the whole work in the case study, and I wanted to have an opportunity to kind of tease it out a little more. Part of what I've done in the case study is put a hell of a lot of responsibility on Indigenous scholars and academics and Indigenous units in engaging the academy, and actually I think it's the other way around. And part of what I want to do is to really challenge some of that, and that's tricky. You know, it's tricky because we're at a stage at the moment where there aren't so many Indigenous students who are thinking and writing about this stuff yet, and also the whole term Indigenous and the whole enticing nature of thinking of indigeneity as this pan-Aboriginal context, you know, that we can draw on the strength of what's happening in other countries, which is so true and so problematic all at the same time. So part of what I'm trying to do is to examine that. But here in this preamble to the special study, I'm also very aware, again, that I'm using this linear form and that I'm not breaking it. If I'm being conversational, I'm doing what's permitted within the context of a kind of presentation. This kind of presentation, or in fact, the kind of material that I could present at a conference. But I'd still need to support it, back it up with material. And what I discovered was that in developing a special study that talked about the failure of the academy to understand the testing processes within Indigenous communities, I myself had to do a hell of a lot more book research and text research and non-academic examinations of the material, and particularly then examinations of not only non-academic material but also very rigid structures of the academy, like looking at Bourdieu's stuff, like looking at Smith's stuff, which I've looked at before but never really thought about it in this light. And so these are the kinds of scholars that I've had to engage in this way. I even had to look at Bloom's taxonomy. I'm not even sure I think that's a bloody good thing, but just thinking about the higher order learning process. And so for me, part of it has been a process of realising that if I really want to challenge the way that that material is disseminated, I have to do it not using this kind of form, but thinking about other means, thinking about ways that actually subvert the canon. This reinforces it, and I guess that's there in my special study. I wanted to just finish off by saying that I think that this kind of material and this kind of process can, but I think that we run the risk always of it being seen as more difficult. And I want to bring up the, Kerry-Ann's idea of the rather interesting panoptic gaze that is then thrust upon Indigenous people, that we have to be hyper-vigilant that we're not being seen to be dodgy in our processes. And so that's the basis, I guess, of realising that I have to engage that work rather differently. So hopefully it comes through in the special study. But again, I think in some ways the failure of it to come through in a special study is as interesting as the success of it. Maybe not as good, but as interesting. So here we go. Thanks.